Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something we all know and love?
Sounds intriguing. What are we diving into today?
Friendship. But not just any friendship. Those awesome bonds we forged back in our school days.
Ah, those school days. Makes you think back, doesn't it?
It really does. Remember forming those connections between classes, hanging out in the hallways?
Oh yeah, even those shared experiences during detention. Gotta love those.
Exactly. It's fascinating how those seemingly simple interactions can create such powerful bonds.
Absolutely. And you know what's even more fascinating?
What's that?
How those simple English words and phrases we use to describe those relationships reveal so much about the dynamics at play, like best friends or classmates or even just study buddies.
You're right. We're using a podcast episode all about English vocabulary for friendship as our springboard for today's deep dive.
And it's amazing how much we can unpack from these simple terms. Like, did you ever stop to think about how school acts as a kind of crucible for friendship?
A crucible.
Yeah, it's often our first real experience building bonds outside of our immediate family.
That's so true. It's like we're thrown into this social melting pot and we have to figure out how to navigate those relationships.
Exactly. And what's interesting is it's not just about socializing. School friendships actually play a huge role in shaping our identities during those crucial adolescent years.
So it's more than just hanging out and having fun.
Way more. We're figuring out who we are, where we fit in, and who we want to be.
Wow, it's like a real-life social experiment.
Yeah.
And you know, it makes me think about all those labels we use: best friend, classmate, study buddy. It's like we create this whole ecosystem with its own unique vocabulary.
And those labels reflect different levels of connection and shared experience. Like, remember that example from our source? My best friend and I were classmates in high school. We used to be study buddies before exams.
I remember that one. It shows how those roles can intertwine, creating these really unique bonds we often see in schools.
Exactly. But then, what happens when we graduate? What happens to those carefully cultivated friendships when we toss those graduation caps in the air?
Yeah, it's almost like standing at a fork in the road.
It is a fork in the road, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some friendships naturally fade, that whole drifting apart thing.
And then there are others that defy the odds. They find ways to stay in touch, even when life pulls them in different directions.
That's when things get really interesting, because sometimes there are actual reasons those friendships last. Like, there's a ton of research on this, and proximity plays a huge role. Think about it. Moving to different cities or pursuing different careers can physically separate us.
It's like life throws these curveballs, and sometimes those friendships just can't weather the storm.
Right. But then you have those inspiring stories of people who have stayed connected for decades. Despite the distance, they've managed to remain close.
They've definitely earned that special title,
Yeah.
old friend. It's like a badge of honor, don't you think?
Absolutely. And it's not just about sentimentality either. Research shows strong, long-lasting friendships have real benefits for our well-being.
Really? Like what?
Well, studies have shown they can actually reduce stress, even boost your immune system. Some research even suggests these friendships can increase longevity.
Wow, that's amazing. Signing up for lifelong friendships. But seriously, how do we actually make sure those bonds survive? You know, like life gets busy, priorities shift. How do we keep those school friendships thriving?
That's the million-dollar question. And you know what? The answer might surprise you.
I'm all ears.
It's not always about those grand gestures or elaborate plans.
So what is it about?
It's about small, consistent effort. Weaving those friendships into the fabric of our lives. Think about the phrase catch up.
Catch up.
It perfectly captures that act of reconnecting, bridging the gaps, and keeping those bonds strong.
So we're not waiting for that perfect moment to have that big reunion.
Not at all. It's about making those small efforts to stay connected in a genuine way.
I like that. But how do we do that when everyone is so busy? I mean, yeah, a quick text here and there is great, but is that really enough to nurture those relationships?
That's where it gets interesting. It's about finding those meaningful touch points, those interactions that go beyond the surface level. And one of the best ways to do that, tapping into those shared interests.
Shared interests. You mean like the stuff we used to bond over back in school?
Exactly. What activities light you both up? What topics could you talk about for hours?
You know, it's funny because a lot of those shared interests probably go all the way back to our school days.
Right. It's like those early experiences, geeking out over a band in the cafeteria or bonding over a book in the library, sort of lay the groundwork for things we still connect over as adults.
Totally. It's
Yeah.
like those early moments create a foundation for the friendship.
And what's really cool is that it doesn't even have to be something you both were into back then.
Oh, you mean like we can discover new things together even as adults?
Exactly. Maybe you both catch the travel bug or find a new author you both love. Those shared discoveries can really strengthen that bond, you know?
Absolutely. Like you're adding new layers to that foundation.
Okay, so we've got making time for each other, finding those points of connection through shared interests. What else can we do to make sure those school friendships are still going strong as we get older?
Well, here's where things get a little bit deeper. Remember that phrase, close friend?
Yeah, close friends.
It suggests a certain level of trust, right?
Hmm.
Intimacy even. And those qualities, they grow when we really listen to each other and offer support.
So being there for the good times and the bad.
Exactly. Lending an ear without judgment, just showing up for each other in ways that really matter.
I totally get that. But honestly, sometimes that's easier said than done. Life gets in the way. People change. And sometimes those friendships, well, they hit a rough patch. How do you navigate those tricky situations? Is it always worth fighting for those friendships? That's the big question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. Sometimes, like our source mentioned, friendships just naturally grow apart. It doesn't necessarily mean anything bad happened.
Yeah, sometimes people just change and grow in different directions.
Exactly. Their interests change, their lives take different paths, and sometimes those friendships just kind of fade.
I can definitely relate to that. I have friends from high school who I haven't talked to in years. And you know what? That's okay. We shared some incredible moments, and I treasure those memories. But our lives have gone in different directions. It's almost like those friendships served a purpose for a certain chapter, and that's beautiful in its own way.
I think so too. And it's important to acknowledge that sometimes letting go can actually be a healthy thing. But when you have those really special friendships, those core friendships that have been through thick and thin, those are the ones worth holding on to.
Absolutely. It's like they've become a part of who we are, woven into the fabric of our lives. But okay, let's get real for a sec. How do you actually fight for a friendship? What does that look like when we're all juggling crazy schedules and everything else life throws at us?
Well, for starters, it's realizing that those friendships require effort. It's like any other important relationship, you got to put in the work. And remember those things we talked about earlier, making time, finding those shared interests, listening, offering support. Those are the fundamentals.
So it's about showing up, being present, even when it's inconvenient.
You got it. But what about when conflicts pop up? How do we handle those disagreements and misunderstandings without ruining the friendship?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Any tips?
Communication is key. But remember, it's not just about talking, it's about listening. Truly listening to the other person's point of view, even if you don't agree with them.
It's about seeing things from their perspective.
Exactly. And you approach those tough conversations with empathy, a willingness to find some middle ground. You're on the same team, even when you're seeing things differently.
That's such a good point. Sometimes those disagreements can actually make the friendship stronger if we handle them the right way. But let's be honest, sometimes, even when we have the best intentions, friendships hit a wall. What happens then? What advice would you give for those situations where maybe someone's feelings got hurt or trust was broken? Can those relationships be saved? Or are there times when it's better to walk away?
That's a tough one. And I think it really depends on the specifics of the situation and whether both people are willing to put in the effort to fix things. Sometimes a heart-to-heart, a genuine apology, even just acknowledging the distance can be enough to bring you back together.
So there is hope for some of those friendships.
Sometimes. But sometimes, no matter how hard you try, a friendship might have just run its course. And you know what? That's okay too. It's just part of life. But, as we're talking about this, it makes me think about how much our school friends actually teach us about ourselves. It's like those relationships act as mirrors, reflecting back parts of ourselves that we might not even be aware of.
Oh, I like that. It's like we're seeing ourselves through their eyes.
Yeah. The people we hang out with, especially during those younger years, can really impact how we see ourselves. Think about it. In school, you're trying out different versions of yourself.
Testing the waters, experimenting with who we are.
Exactly. You're figuring out what you like, what you don't like. And the friends you connect with often reveal a lot about your values and what you're looking for in relationships.
You're so right. It's like we're drawn to people who either complement who we are or challenge us to grow.
I think it's a bit of both, honestly. And sometimes those friendships can highlight areas where we need to improve. Maybe we need to be more patient, more understanding, or more open-minded.
It's like they show us our blind spots. And those realizations, they can be tough, but they can also help us become better people.
Definitely. And those lessons, they often come through making mistakes,
Yeah.
trying things out and seeing what happens. School is like a giant social experiment, and friendships are a big part of that.
That's a great way to put it. We're all testing out different social strategies, seeing what works, what doesn't, and how we can adapt our approach based on who we're interacting with.
Exactly. And you know the best part? We get to do all of this in an environment where messing up is expected. And usually everyone is pretty quick to forgive each other,
That's so true. We can learn and grow from those mistakes.
which is a huge part of what makes those school friendships so special, right?
Absolutely. They shape us in more ways than we realize. But you know what else I find fascinating about these friendships? The nostalgia factor. It's like those memories, school dances, inside jokes, late night study sessions. They have this incredible way of transporting us back in time.
Nostalgia is powerful stuff. And those school friendships are often tied to so many of those warm and fuzzy memories.
For sure. And it's not just about wishing we could go back, is it? It's also about appreciating how far we've come since then.
It's true. Looking back at those old photos or yearbooks, it's amazing to see how much we've changed and grown.
And it can also remind us how much we've learned along the way.
You know, sometimes when we think back on those times, it makes us want to reconnect with people from that part of our lives. It's like, I wonder what so-and-so is up to these days.
And now with social media, it's so easy to find people and reach out.
You're telling me. It's crazy to think about how much easier it is to rekindle those connections now. But the question is, how do we balance appreciating those nostalgic memories with, actually living in the present and focusing on the future? Can we do both without getting stuck in the past?
That's a good question. It's a delicate balance for sure.
It really is. But I think the key is finding a way to honor those friendships and recognize how much they've impacted who we are without letting them define us.
So we don't want to dwell on the past, but we also don't want to forget those valuable experiences.
Precisely. And sometimes when we remember those friendships, even the ones that aren't a part of our lives anymore, it can motivate us to be better friends now.
You mean like it inspires us to reach out to someone we haven't talked to in a while?
Yeah.
Or just be more present and appreciative of the friends we have now?
Exactly. It's like we carry those friendships with us, not as baggage weighing us down, but as a compass guiding us forward.
I love that analogy. It's about using those experiences to help us navigate our relationships in the present and the future.
You got it. So, as we're wrapping up this deep dive into the amazing world of school friendships, what's one thing you hope our listeners will take away from all of this?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's the reminder that these friendships, even though they start in a very specific context, they can have such a lasting impact on our lives. They shape who we are, how we relate to others, and even how we view the world.
So well said. And I hope they realize that even those friendships that have maybe faded or changed over time, they can still hold valuable lessons and memories.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to remember that these relationships require effort. It's about making time, listening with empathy, showing up for each other, really putting in the work to make sure those connections stay strong.
And if I could add one more thing, I'd encourage everyone listening to think about a school friend they haven't connected with in a while. What would it take to reach out? Could rekindling that bond actually bring something positive into your life right now?
That's a great challenge. It's never too late to reconnect with someone who is important to you.
And remember, the effort you put into those friendships is an investment in your own well-being.
Such a powerful reminder.
Well, it looks like we've reached the end of another deep dive. Thanks for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
And until next time,
Yeah.
keep diving deep, and don't forget to cherish those connections that mean the most to you.
See you all next time. So we've talked about how much we learn about ourselves from these school friendships, how they shape our social skills, and even how they can push us to grow as people. But you know what else is interesting? That whole nostalgia thing we were talking about earlier. It's like those memories of school dances, inside jokes, late night study sessions. They really take you back, don't they?
Nostalgia is a powerful thing, isn't it? And you're right, those school friendships are often tied to so many vivid memories.
Totally. And it's not just about wanting to go back in time, is it? It's about looking back and appreciating how much we've changed.
It is. When you look at those old photos or yearbooks, it's amazing to see how much we've grown and evolved. It's almost like looking at a different person.
I know, right? And it's also a reminder of everything we've learned and experienced along the way. Sometimes those trips down memory lane make you want to reconnect with people from that time in your life. It's like, I wonder what they're up to now.
And with social media these days, It's so easy to find people and reach out.
It's crazy how simple it is to reconnect now. But here's the thing. How do we balance that appreciation for the past with living in the present and focusing on the future? Can we do both without getting stuck in those memories?
That's the challenge, right? And finding that sweet spot between cherishing those memories and moving forward. Like the key is to recognize how much those friendships, even the ones that have faded, have shaped who we are.
So they've left their mark, but they don't define us.
Exactly. They've influenced our values, our beliefs, even how we approach relationships in the present. But we can't let them hold us back from growing and evolving.
I love that. It's like we carry those friendships with us, not as baggage, but as a compass.
Beautifully put. We use those experiences to guide us, to help us navigate new relationships and challenges. So as we wrap up our deep dive into school friendships, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will remember?
That's a good question. For me, it's that even though these friendships start in a very specific place and time, they can have such a lasting impact on our lives.
Well said. And I hope they realize that even those friendships that have faded or changed over time, they still hold so much value. The lessons we learn, the memories we share, they're all part of who we are.
I completely agree. And it's also a reminder that these friendships, like any relationship, they take effort. We have to make time, listen with empathy, and show up for each other. If we want those bonds to stay strong, we've got to put in the work.
And to add to that, I'd love for everyone listening to think about a school friend they haven't connected with in a while. What would it take to reach out? Could rekindling that bond actually bring something positive into your life today?
That's such a great challenge, and it's never too late to reconnect with someone who is special to you.
Exactly. You never know what might come from it. And remember, taking the time to nurture those connections is also a way of taking care of yourself.
Such wise words. Well, on that note, it looks like we've come to the end of another deep dive. Thanks for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
And to all our listeners, keep diving deep into the world around you, and remember to cherish those friendships that matter most. We'll see you next time.